Hello, everyone. This is David Ferguson with 5,000 Fish. Thanks for joining our webinar today. We're going to do a deep dive training, and I just noticed my slides say deep drive, so I'm not going to drive anywhere today, even though dashboards and driving do go together. We're going to do a deep dive, and meaning that I'm going to take you deep into our dashboard filters and save view feature and show you how to use that successfully in your organization. If you do have any questions at all while we go through this, please enter them into the public chat. There's also a Q&A tab, so you can enter them there as well. I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll save some time at the end of this webinar to answer any of the questions. And if we don't have time, I'll be sure to follow up with everyone who had a question and make sure you get that answer. Very focused and targeted agenda for today's webinar. We're going to first just show you what the feature is, show you what the end case, what the desired end state of the dashboard filters and save views are. Then we're going to go into how to actually build them, and I'm going to take you step by step through that process and show you all the best practices and the key tips that you're going to need in order to do it. So most of this webinar will be hands-on. You'll see me working within the product. And of course, at the end, everyone who registered for this webinar will receive a link to the recording. So you'll have everything that I'm going to do recorded so that you can reproduce it if you have any questions afterwards. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen. And you should be seeing the Yerby login page now. So this is the most current version of Yerby, and I guess it's important to state that if you are not on version 11, you're not going to have the dashboard filters and save views. This is a new feature specifically for version 11, and I'm just for reference, if you go to Yerby version, you can see if you're on version 11. You'll see I'm on 11.1, and I'm on the very latest build as well. So I've got all the latest patches and fixes. And if you do need assistance in getting up to date, just contact us at support@yerby.com and we can help you. Now, in version 11, we have this thing called demo mode, and that's what I'm in today. And one of the things that we pre-populate in demo mode is a couple of dashboard examples with some saved views and filters. So if you notice when I load this dashboard in, there's a little bar here above the dashboard. You'll see new filter. You'll also see a save views with a drop down, and also save this view with a drop down. We'll take a look and explore all of these. But when I'm looking at a dashboard, of course, I can drill down and do all the things that you can do on a dashboard. But if I go to my save views, you'll see that this particular dashboard has one listed here. I'll go ahead and click on that. You'll see that that is a saved collection of filters that now have been loaded into this dashboard. And from a user perspective, they can now turn on these filters and also change what these filters will filter for. So for example, I'll just hit that star and you'll see the gold indicator come on, meaning that it's turned on. And now this particular dashboard has been filtered for the umbrella corporation based on the account field that's within each of these reports. And that's what we're going to talk about today. As a user, I can click on this little drop down symbol and switch and pick a different account. And I can also turn on different types of filters and start to see the exact combination of filters that I want to see on this particular dashboard. What's nice is you apply these filters as I go and drill down and do any of the things that you would normally do on a dashboard. Those filter settings follow into the drill down reports, just like any kind of criteria that you use within Yerby. So pretty powerful. Let's take a look at another example. I'll bring up this particular demo dashboard. So that first example, we just saved one view. And you'll see here we've got a couple different views. So you could have very specific views, like this was just a view showing year to date on this particular dashboard. And you'll see that it was automatically enabled when I pulled that view up. So very easy to create any kind of filter sets, save as many of these as you want. I just loaded up another one that's year to date, and it has in addition the territory North America. And if I turn that off, you'll see that all the territories will then be shown on this dashboard. So that's the concept. Now, within Yerby, you have two different types of save views. You've got the save view that's packaged in with the actual dashboard itself. And then every individual user can save their own filters and save it as a view and have their own personal views. I'm going to log out, give you a quick example of that. And then we're going to use this user again as we start to build our own save views and build our own filter sets. But I want to show you that this particular user is going to log in, and immediately, let me go ahead and switch to their same dashboard we were looking at. You'll see they've got a filter that's loading in by default. It's turned off, but it's here. And if I go to my save views, you'll see that they've got the view that we looked at on the admin side that's shipped out with the dashboard. But this particular user at the personal level built themselves a view. You'll notice, you see that little star indicator? Well, a couple things here. You'll see that they have no ability to delete that view that's shipped with the dashboard. That's a read-only view for them. The view that they created, they absolutely can delete. But you'll also see that they click that gold star to favorite that view. And that's why it loaded by default when we came in and rendered this dashboard. So that's a little bit of just the high level overview, and the power of this feature is that as the builder of the dashboard, you can create a set of filter views or save views, have them on or off, and have default settings assigned to them, and have them available in this list for any user to just come in and pick. So I can pick that one and you'll see the same kind of presentation as we saw before. And of course, a user can say, hey, I want that to be my default as well by clicking that gold star. But the user has the permission as well to create their own filters and to favorite those and have those loaded by default as well. So again, if I reload this dashboard, you'll see by default their view is displayed, and they can go in and do all the things that they would normally do within that filter view. And you can see here they can also add their own and save new views, and we'll do that as a part of this webinar. All right, so now let's log back in. I'm going to go ahead and set up a brand new dashboard and show you some of the key considerations as you build reports to make them available for users to set these filters up. So there's a couple of key best practices and rules that we want to use. I'm going to pop into the builder. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing reports. In fact, I'm going to make extremely simple reports off the pipeline data set here. What I'm going to do is make about 4 different reports to show you 4 different use cases or things that you should be aware of when you're designing reports to be used in dashboard filters. You're going to do a couple things that you normally would not do in reports or even think to do. So I'm going to just make one report that's just going to be just a regular old data set. I'm going to bring in a couple fields here. Let's bring in a date field so you can see how that operates. I'll bring in account name, and I'm going to bring in sales rep name. So I've got, what do I have here? 6 fields in this report. I'm going to go ahead and save this report, and I'm going to call this all fields report. I'm just going to make it available to all users for now, and I'm going to save them in this folder I created in the library called webinar. So that's going to be our first report. We're going to just build a couple different reports and show you different things. Now let's say on my product, I want to add a hard-coded criteria. So as the builder, I have an intention that I want this report to be limited to just this particular item. I'm going to not do a prompt or anything like that. I'm just going to add a hard-coded criteria, and you'll see that. I'm going to save this as a report. I'm going to call this one criteria added. And if I can spell criteria, that would probably look a little bit better. And I'm going to put that also in the webinar. Now let's do another one where we're going to delete a couple fields. I'm going to delete product. Let's delete account name, and let's delete sales rep. So I've just got these 3 fields left in this report. Let's save as, and I'm going to call this one missing fields. This will make sense when you see them in use with the dashboard filters, but I'm just going to show you, make sure you're clear on all the different things we're doing here. And then let's make one more which is kind of like a KPI. I'm going to go ahead and add a formula. I'm going to sum up all my amounts here, and I'm going to go ahead and delete a couple fields here. I've just got one big number, and I'm going to just pop that into a KPI like that and make it a currency. So I'm not even going to put a title or anything. I'm just going to keep it really simple. 17 million, nice big number. And I'm going to call this KPI. So you'll see that I did a save as. So now within my webinar folder, I should have those 4 different use cases that we're going to take a look. Let's just go take a look and see what I've got. All right, so I've got the 4 different use cases. And then what I'm going to do is come back over into my dashboard side and just create a quick dashboard and bring those reports in. So let's bring in my all fields. Oh, actually, I'm going to call this dashboard webinar. So if anything, this gave you a quick little overview of how to build reports and dashboards, but I would encourage you to look at our other webinars for that as well. I'm going to put this in the same webinar folder. I'm going to put it in there and make it all users so that our sales user that we logged into before will be able to use them. Okay, let's go ahead and add a widget. I'll call this my all fields one. So these are just going to be very simple. Same concepts I'm applying here would apply to charts and drill downs and all those sorts of things that you can do within Yerby. I'm just going to do a really simple dashboard, and I'm just going to, shrink these up. I'll add in another one. I'll bring the KPI in. Not going to worry about sizing these up and making these look right, because the concept is I just want you to have a couple of similar reports with some things so you can see as we start to add these filters. This one's going to be criteria added, and that was this report. You'll notice that by default Yerby's going to just pop these in the next available space, and the last one was missing fields. So I'm going to label them like that so you kind of understand how different things operate, different use cases for these filters. All right, perfect. So we've got our 4 reports labeled and on our dashboard. Now, we've got a dashboard, we've got some data here, and now I'm going to show you the key things you need to understand as you're building reports with the filters in mind. So let's do our first filter. We hadn't actually made a filter yet. What I'm going to do now, I'm the dashboard owner, and basically that means that I can edit and modify the dashboard. So you'll see here, I can edit, I can delete. That means I have ownership and control of this dashboard. Any filters and any views that you save while you are the editor of the dashboard gets shipped out with the dashboard. So that's one caveat that we mentioned. If you have read-only permission to the dashboard, then any filters that you save as views are going to be saved at just your personal levels. That's key takeaway number 1. So as I build these filter views, I'm going to keep in mind that they're going to be available to everybody who has access to these dashboards. If you as an individual wanted to have your own, I would say copy the dashboard, and then you work off of a copy of the dashboard. That way you won't affect the dashboard for anyone else. All right, let's make a filter. This little icon here next to the word new filter, we're going to click on that. And that's going to pop up the filter creation screen. And it's a 3-step, so it's a multi-step process where essentially you give it a name, you select the filter type that you want to create, and then you select the fields that are related to that. You'll see that these fields here, there's 4. They represent the widgets, the reports that are loaded on this dashboard. So I loaded 4 reports, all fields report, the KPI, criteria added, and missing fields. So whatever label, whatever the name of that report is, not the label I put in the widget, but the actual name of the report is going to show here, so you know what report you're operating on. Now, by default, you'll see that it's going to build a text filter, because that's honestly, other than a date filter, that's going to be your most common. And before I even put a name, let's just expand and show what filter fields I have available from a text. And this is going to be the first key thing I wanted to point out to you. So now in the all filters report, that's where we have basically all 4 text fields available. That was the report where we put everything in there. We got deal stage, product, account name, and sales rep. Now in that KPI report, that only had the one field in there. You'll see there was no text fields represented, so I can't build any filter that's going to affect that KPI. I'm going to show you how to fix that in a second, but that's the key thing. Because that KPI was only a one field report and it didn't have any text fields, it only has a numeric field, doesn't have anything there available. The criteria added, if you remember on product, we hard coded a criteria. You'll see here, product does not show in our filter selection criteria. So when you hard code something, that's from a Yerby perspective, it means that the buyer, the builder intent was that they should not go beyond this hard coded constraint. Now I'm going to show you as part of this webinar how to hard code something and make it available for filtering. But if the intention is that you never want them to see anything more than that particular report with that criteria added, then you keep it hard coded and you'll notice that it does not show up here. And then the missing fields one. Remember, we only added one field there or two fields there, so those others are not represented, only deal stage. Now, before we get out of here, let's look at numeric. None of these had a numeric operator except for KPI. You'll see KPI now has pipeline value there. So again, I can't really do a filter that will affect anything related to this pipeline value but the KPI. And let's look at the date. So you'll see the date is going to be there. Of course, it's not in the KPI. It's there and it's in that one. So the date could affect everything but the KPI. Now, let's go ahead and just make a quick one. I'm going to call it a date. Let's do a date since we've got that. Since I want to do a date, well, I'm just going to go through and check the box of every report where I want date to be updated automatically for. Of course, I can't do KPI, and we'll talk about how to add that in a second. Once I've selected my checkboxes across all of the different widgets or reports on this dashboard, I want to select Create. You'll see it'll look very similar to our criteria builder. Now, a couple of key things about the criteria builder and dashboard filters. Even though we have all of these operators showing at the moment, the only two that you're going to use that are relevant to dashboard filters today, and I say today because this will be increasing in the near future, will be equal and enlist. And I'll show you both in the course of this webinar, but I'm going to select equal. And whatever we put here as our equal is going to be the default value for that filter. So I'm going to put, in this case, I'll put year to date as a good option there. I'll add it to the table. You'll see it there as current criteria, and I'll hit save. Now, by default, it's going to automatically be on once you save. And you'll notice that all those filters updated that I selected, except for, of course, the KPI. If I were to go in here and change and say, let's say last week, then that KPI number is still 17 million. That's not adjusting, but everything else here you'll see is this week. If I sort, you'll see that everything else is this week. So that filter is operating on all the widgets that we associated it with. But one of the key considerations as you build reports is, ideally, as a best practice, you want every widget on this dashboard to have the ability to have that filter applied. Doesn't really make sense. In fact, it would be quite confusing to your end users if you had this dashboard and you were applying your filter, but your main KPI did not also adjust with that filter. I'll show you that one more time. Let's look at last year, see if I've got some old data in there. So you see everything's going to update, but that KPI just stays 17 million, because if I were go and look at that filter, let's take a look at that. I click the edit button again. That's going to bring that up where I can edit it, delete that criteria. But if I just wanted to show you, I don't have date selected for the KPI. It's not an option for me. Now, if I wanted to delete this filter, I can click this little trash can and get the dashboard back to the regular state at that point. All right, so now I'm going to shift gears. Now that you've seen how to create the filters and how the filter selection process works, we're going to go back and take use case by use case, why I made all these fields, and show you how to enable things for each. Since we spent so much, well, let's build with the criteria added. So if you remember on criteria added, that product would not show because I've got the product hard coded at this point to just the GTX basic. Let's drag that up. You'll see all I have is GTX basic. But let's say I do want to have a filter on product from a user perspective. Let's go back to our library and edit the criteria added one. So it's a pretty simple thing, very easy to do. I've got my hard-coded criteria. I'm just going to edit that criteria. And the only thing I have to do to make that, to indicate to Yorubi, like, yes, I am hard coding this criteria for the default report. The reason you might want to do that is just to put date restrictions on it. We never encourage you to do open-ended reporting. We always say limit it by some date range so that if you run it, you're not bringing back 5-10 years worth of history. You might have a hard-coded constraint that says year to date or something like that, but you want that to have an option so that users can filter it in the dashboard. All you have to do is click this button, enable prompt skipping. So we're not enabling the prompt. That has a whole different functionality. Of course, you can do that. Nothing to prevent you from doing that. But in this case, we're hard coding the criteria. But when we say enable prompt skipping, that's going to tell the dashboard, hey, you can do a filter on that. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to overwrite this report, and we're going to go back to the dashboard, and we're going to build a filter on product, and you're going to see that it's available now. So let's go back over here to the dashboard and select our webinar example. And now let's add that new filter. So I still have that hard-coded criteria. Before, you did not see product. Now, let's go ahead and do one on product. I'll select product here. Still don't have it in KPI. But now, look at that. Product shows up even though it has a hard-coded criteria. So that's number one. Let's go ahead, and I don't have it in missing fields yet either. So we'll just do a quick product one only for those two widgets. And again, I've got my equal there. This time, let's demonstrate enlist. I'm going to do enlist. Actually, when you do your enlist, you want to pick a valid name, GTX Pro. So I'm going to default this to GTX Pro. If you did want to have a multi-select by default, just put a comma and continue to put valid names at this case. I'm going to go ahead and add GTX Pro with an enlist operator. Save that filter. You'll see it's turned on and GTX Pro is valid. But now you'll notice that even though I hard-coded this report to GTX Basic, because this filter is turned on with Pro, the filter is able to override that hard-coded criteria and meet the end user's need. So you have the best of both worlds. You could hard-code something and say, no matter what you do, Mr. User, you can't go beyond that filter. Or you could hard code something and make it a filter option. Keep in mind, if you have data level security, multi-tenant security turned on, nothing will override that. So all their multi-tenant security is still going to be enforced. But watch this. I did an enlist, if you remember. If I click on that, now I've got a multi-pick here. A little hard to see on my screen right now, but now I can say, well, let's see the advanced. And let's also take a look at the Pro. You'll see I get a little indication of how many checkboxes I have selected. And now if I were to go into that criteria added report, you can see I've got both Pro and Advanced, even though I originally hard-coded that as basic. So a little bit of that's the first use case. Now let's talk about the second use case, this missing fields report. I don't have product in this report. So I can't filter this particular widget on product. I'm going to go and edit that particular one, the missing fields one. And we have a nice solution for you to build your report with that in mind. Only 3 fields today. If I wanted to bring in product, essentially that modifies my report. Let's bring in a couple more things. I want to bring in sales rep and account name. If I want to have it available for filtering, but not have it display or impact my report whatsoever, you add it to the report. Make sure not to put any criteria, formulas, or sort order or anything at all on the field, because if you do those things, of course, it will impact the report. It becomes part of the SQL query that we're going to build against the database. So you don't want to put any sort of features on these fields. You simply want to add them and turn them off, make them non-visible. So they're in the report definition, but they don't have any criteria. So just to be clear, no criteria, no totals, no group by, no add formula, and no sort order. And if you do it that way and you just keep them in the report with visibility turned off, you'll notice I've got the exact same report that we had before, but with these three fields in here as non-visible, they will now be accessible as filter options for your users. So this is one of the key things as you're building reports for filters and save views, is anything that you might envision a user wanting to use, put them in there. And then anything that you're going to add on that dashboard, make sure every report has the same common set so that as they add that filter, they don't have one widget that doesn't have that option available. Now, the trade-off, there's a trade-off to this. By adding these in as non-visible fields with no impact to the query whatsoever, it does add more overhead in terms of calling the database. So you don't want to go crazy. I wouldn't recommend you add your entire report tree in as a bunch of non-visible fields. Nothing would prevent you from doing it, but that's a little excessive. What I would recommend is you think about the specific questions and use cases of your end users and what filters that they will want to use. And if there's a field like, annual revenue, which may or may not be, but let's just assume it's something they would never want to filter that dashboard by, don't add it into the report definition. It's just you're making your report definition object bigger. Whenever you make that object bigger, it just flows through and adds latency throughout. I'm going to go ahead and save. I'm going to overwrite this report. We've already got it added to the dashboard. I did not change the report structure whatsoever. And now we're going to go back. Now, to save time, I'm going to go do that same thing to KPI because that's the trick on the KPI. Let's go ahead and edit the KPI. You'll see before, just got this 117 million number. Now, as I add in things like deal stage, product, the date field, if I add in the account and I add in the sales rep, all of that modifies my query itself. If I were to go back to the data table, I'll see all those rows now. In fact, if I go view full screen, I believe, this will just show me the KPI, not the data table, but I could go back to the grid and see that. What I want to make sure I do is turn off the visibility on all of these so that I do not impact the intention of my specific report, but I do make them available. So I'm back to the 17 million. One of the key things is if I were to come in here and add something on a non-visible field like a criteria, well, then that becomes part of the SQL query. It's going to impact the 17 million. If I did come in and add even a sort order on a non-visible field, doesn't always, but in many cases, that is going to impact my visualization. You'll see it did. It doesn't affect it. You can't have a non-visible with just that one sort order. So that's how I took it off. Just so you see, if you turn on a sort order and you want to turn it off, you just go back under sort and click that radio button again. It goes off. So very easy to add these non-visible fields into any report, whether it be a chart, a graph, a KPI, any element where you want to have them available. All right, now let's go back that we've got all of our reports consistent in terms of what fields are available. We can actually start to build some filter sets and then save them as views. So now let's take a look at what we have. Let's do one first on date. I always like to do a date as my first filter. It's one of the most common things that you filter on. So we'll pick the date from here. Now KPI has the date because we added that as a non-visible field. That has a date. And of course, this one has a date. That's where we want to be. We want all things to work there. I'm going to do an equal, add to the table, and save that. And now I've got the ability. You'll notice I defaulted to today, and not everything has a date. Now look at this. You'll notice why is this one blank where the other ones are not. Keep in mind that that report had the criteria added for the hard-coded one of GTX basic or whatever it was that I added. To show you that, what I'm going to do next is add product. But that criteria is still hard coded until we make a filter to override it. So you have really a lot of power in terms of how you want to structure your report operations. Let's call this product, and then we'll add in product and scroll down. So as I show these, you'll see that the scroll bar appears. So if you have a lot of widgets on your report, you'll have more of these to select. Your best practice, we really don't recommend you have more than about 6 to 8 widgets. Anything more than that, maybe think about separating it into another dashboard. So for the product, I'll do equal. And you'll see the list here, and I'll say Pro is my default on the product. Add that. So now with Pro as my default, even with today selected, well, I don't have any Pros today. So I can pick something else like basic. See if I have any basics today. Actually, what I probably need to do is expand this into more like this year. Then I'll have a little bit more data. But you'll notice as I'm doing that, I'm not getting 17 million on this KPI. I'm getting how many of the GTX basic I sold for this entire year. And that gives you the power. Let's say, for example, you made that mistake and you did not want today. You just go back in and edit that. If I edit that, I can add that back to the table and save that. Now, you'll notice that it was already edited because I selected it here, but I can save this view or overwrite this view. This is probably a good time to do that. I could continue to add filters. Pretty clear how to do filters. I do want to show you one more important thing about adding filters that's important. But before we do that, let's go ahead and save this as a view. This might, by having it turned on and default to specific things, I would give this view a very specific name as a best practice. So for example, I might click Save this view, Save As, and this might be year to date for GTX basic products. Something very specific. Even though you can always pick new ones, by default, this is going to be turned on and defaulted to that. So that's what I would call my view. So now if I look at my save views, I've got that. I click on that. It's going to load for me with the understanding if I did want to switch products, I could easily do that. But there is a default presentation. Now, let's say you were making just a full list of filters that users can just load in and turn on as they want, as you saw me do in that first example. Well, just turn off the filters and then save the view like that. So I could go through and add, let's go ahead and add, well, I'll do that in a second, but let's go ahead and just, if I click save this view now, you'll see I get the opportunity to either overwrite that one that I just saved or save this as a new one. And I'll save this as a new one. Now I'll just call this core filters. You can name it anything. I like using core filters as meaning that it's my core filter set that I'm going to have available to myself. And now you'll see under save views, I've got both of those that I can switch between and default. And that's something I didn't mention, but if you wanted to have core filters as the default filter for everybody, you can default it here as the owner of the dashboard, and then that will load for everybody until they designate their own default or make their own set of filters. So that's a very powerful feature I didn't mention at the beginning. Now, one more thing to make with filters before we take a look at the personal side of filtering is, in addition to being able to have these filters the way I've just, let's turn them back on so you can kind of see what's going on here. So this is an and condition. I'm saying I want everything this year and I want everything that's GTX Pro. You can also do or conditions and is nots and the other things that's in this filter set. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to say, instead of, let's bring in a sales rep. And I'll bring in all my sales rep names. Same process as before. And one more. There's a sales rep for this one. So now when I create this criteria, I want to change the logical filter to or. Now, this is not an ideal use case example for this, but I'm going to just show you because this is a very, I would say, fringe use case. You're not going to use or a lot within a save filter, but there are definitely cases where you may want to do that. But now you'll see that I'm bringing back, let's see, let's look at the one with alt fields, probably give us the best example of this. So I'm hard coding it to GTX Pro. I put that first filter as GTX Pro, but you'll notice I also have some GTX basics showing up here. Why? Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's drag that up. If I look at my GTX basics, as actually any of them, they're all by that sales rep. So I'm doing an or condition. I'm saying, give me back my GTX Pro, or give me back anything with this sales rep. So again, very unique type of use case. But if I look at GTX Pro, I've got all kind of sales reps here, not just Vicky, but all my sales reps. But if I look at any of these others, it's only going to be Vicky. And that's sort of so a little bit of a nuanced type of a feature, but with Yerby, we try to make sure we think about every possible situation and use case, and this is a valid use case for some sorts of data. So now if I go through and pick another sales rep like Gladys, it's going to be everything that's pro or Gladys. And of course, if I just turn off one of these, it'll act just like a regular that. So just an idea on how you can use that or as well as your ands when it comes to this filter. In fact, what I'll do is I'm going to edit this filter and turn that back into an and you'll see that it'll go back to operating the way you would expect it, where it has to be both Gladys and Pro. And now you'll see I've got $137,000 this year where Gladys sold GTX Pro, and that is going to be the only thing in these data sets now, 44 records, as you can see. They all match up. So that's the power of the and the or. You can get into some really, really complex sort of environments there. All right, so we've built our dashboard. We really drilled down on that. We've built a couple of views. Let's go ahead and I will go ahead and favorite one of those. Now I'm going to log in and log back out as that sales rep. So you can see now that one is favorited in our views. So as the owner of the dashboard, anything I do is going to kind of be bundled with the dashboard. Let's go back into that user that had read-only access to that dashboard. In fact, I might have actually I might have given them permission to actually have ownership of this dashboard. We'll take a look. Let's see if they have read-only. Yep, they're read-only. Okay, I was hoping that was the case. Now you'll see that it loaded that filter set by default. It's on here. Now another thing that's taking place as well is that you'll notice that if let's zoom into here, I've got a data security policy set that only lets this sales rep see their own data, Zane Levy. So while I've got a filter for this year and GTX Basic, this particular user can still only see their own particular data. So that's a pretty powerful set of data there. And you'll see that it's favorited. And if I can switch and turn on that, and you'll see that by default, this filter was filtered to Gladys, but this person has no ability to see Gladys. In fact, if I were to select the sales rep, my drop-down list is even restricted to just himself. So there's a lot of security there, but that gives you a good consideration on what filters you want to make and what defaults you want to have from that perspective. So you'll see a lot of capability there. Let's go ahead and bring that. Actually, I didn't favorite it. Let's go ahead and make this a favorite. It'll show in my list, and that's an easy way to do a quick refresh, is to get back to your initial state of filters. I guess I didn't. Let's go back and run that again. Now let's say that this particular user wanted to create their own view. Well, they could start from one of the basics. That's one of the easiest things to do. They can also go in and delete filters the way they did before. So because I had that defaulted, I never had my blank slate. So I went in and deleted a couple here. And the same way that we made a filter as a builder, they can make a filter. Let's go in and see if they want to do a filter based on deal stage. That's one that we hadn't taken a look at. And let's go ahead and make this an in-list filter so they can multi-select. So I'm going to create that filter. I'll give it a name. Very easy to forget to give it a name. Always go back and do that. I'm going to do an equal just to see what my choices are. One lost in progress. I'll do an in list and I'll put 1 on that and save that as my filter. So now this will be a dashboard that this person can go in and see all the deals that they won. And if they did want to multi-select, they could say, let me see the ones that are in progress and also 1. I'll do both. So they got a win and in progress dashboard here. Maybe they want to forget about the ones that they lost. Now, as a user, they could come over and save this filter. And I'll just call it deals 1 and in progress. Even though they could change that anytime they want, I'm going to give it a specific name. And now they've got that. And when they go to their view list now, not only do they have the core ones coming with the dashboard, but they also have the one that they created. You'll notice that it defaulted that for me. So now every time I, as the owner of this dashboard, come to look at it, oh, I still didn't favor that dashboard. Let me go ahead and click that to favorite this time. When I come to this dashboard, you'll see it's loaded by default. It's got my options there. And if I did misery wanted some company, I could go ahead and shift that to lost anytime I want and see just my lost opportunities. So that is the concept and the power of these from both the building and operations and maintenance perspective, as well as the individual user. And as you see, everything ties together really nicely in terms of your multi-tenant and data level security, and all the aspects of that. In fact, if I were to go and print this dashboard, and let's go ahead and just make it a little bit bigger, give it some borders. But the key thing is, as I print, you can kind of see the filter set goes with the print so that you can know what filters were applied. Now, if you have there's only so much real estate here. So if you have a large number of filters and if the words that you are selecting, the account names or sales rep names or whatever it might be, are very long, things will start to get truncated and you won't be able to see as much. But as you know, the same thing that you see when you print a dashboard is the same thing that you see when you schedule a dashboard within Yerby. So these filter sets and what's on and how it applies to your particular data will go in your scheduled report as well. Let's do one more, then we'll do a recap. I'll go in and put a date and we'll do a overwrite a filter. That's about the one use case that we did not do yet. Now I'll pick an equal, add that to my table, save that filter, and I once again defaulted to today, which is probably not going to be a good one. Let's do year to date with my particular data. So I've lost that much year to date, and let's be a little bit more optimistic and show how much I won year to date. But now I'm operating on that existing filter that I had already preloaded. So when I go to save this view, I've got the ability to overwrite that existing view or save this as a new one. So again, it's a visual prompt for users to kind of know if they want to overwrite or not. I'll go ahead and overwrite the existing one in this case. And now that'll be my default filter when I load in. But you'll notice that I have no ability to kind of edit, delete, or make any changes over to these. Anything I do on these will be a save as, not a overwrite on that particular case. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and log out. Let's switch back over to our webinar slides. I got one little recap here just to give you the key takeaways that we covered. So first key takeaway is that users with dashboard modify permissions, the operations that they do with the filters and the views apply to the dashboard and will be pushed down to everyone who is a view-only user of that dashboard. So keep that in mind. If you are a builder of the dashboard, but also you use it for your own personal needs, just keep in mind that if you do make any changes and save views, those views go out to everyone. If you do want to have your own sort of personal views, and make a copy of that dashboard for yourself at that particular case. Users with view-only permissions, when they save a view or default a view, it's going to be just for themselves. No one else will have that but them. And it's about that personalization and why we call it your business intelligence, YOURB. The filters that can be used today are going to be your equal and your in list. Now, keep in mind that in both of those, anytime we display a drop down list or a multi-select list, out of the box, there's a limitation of 250 items in that drop down list. Anything more than that, and honestly, even up to 250, the list is really too long. If you do want to expand that, and there are some cases where you might, that's a server setting. You can go into the config file and you can increase that 250. But just keep in mind that if you have a list over 250, then you're going to really be forced at that point to use an in list. Non-visible fields. Non-visible fields are your friend now when you build reports. You want to add as many in your reports as you deem that a user might want to filter on the dashboard. The key as you add the non-visible field, do not add any sort order. Do not add any criteria. Do not add any formulas or anything on there that will put that as part of the query and modify the results of what you're bringing back, but add them as a non-visible field to add them as a filter option. The other best practice around that, don't add everything. Everything you add increases the size of your report object. And if it's something that's unnecessary, you never think they're going to want to filter on it, I don't recommend you add it. You could always come back in and add it later as an option. So I would say keep it lean and focused on user requirements. Then the last thing we covered is if you hard code something, if you add criteria or to a report, by default, YOURB going to believe that you did that on purpose and you don't want anybody to see anything but that hard coded criteria. But from a dashboard filter perspective, you might want people to go beyond that, especially if you're using our data level security. As you saw, data level security will protect your data, even though a hard coded criteria, you might be using that today. If you want to make that available to filtering, just check that enable skip prompt button, and that will allow that field to now be shown inside of your filter creation process. So those are the key takeaways and that you want to remember as you build these dashboard filters and views. All right, I'm going to wrap this one up. I don't see any Q&A. If there is any questions or issues after the fact, just email us, support@yourb.com. We're doing more and more of these webinars. We will be setting up some deep dive training for November as well. We don't have those up on the site yet, but go to yourb.com/webinars. Also, follow us on social media. We post all our webinars multiple times there. If you go to our homepage and click on that What's New, you'll see our webinars listed there. But a couple that we do have coming up is the importance of data segmentation and service desk reporting. This is actually tied with the dashboard views and filters that we're talking about. So we're going to actually show you a real world impact of the filtering against a data set, in this case, service desk reporting. We've got one of our C-level series coming up where we're going to talk about how you can save money on business intelligence operations using YOURB, of course, coming into the new year budget season. And every week we have a weekly demo. So if you want to get a refresher on YOURB, you can join on our weekly demos and just go to yourb.com/webinars. It'll take you to our community channel where you can see any webinars, register, as well as view a lot of our on-demand webinars as well. And speaking of those social media channels, we're everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. We keep you up to date there so we don't have to email you as much. So please follow those. Definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel because we're putting everything up there: tips and tricks, all sorts of little smaller form videos so that you can learn new things that you might not have known about in the YOURB platform. All right, I'm going to wrap it up a little bit early here. Thanks for everyone for joining. Thanks for watching our webinar today. And if you do have any questions, just contact us at support@yerby.com, and look forward to seeing you on our future webinars as well. Have a blessed day.